Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Stephen Martin, and he's going to tell us about an out-of-body experience that started him on a new path. Hi, Stephen.
Hello, good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming. So where would you like to start?
Well, yeah, you mentioned my out of body experience, which really started me on this journey to find out or to try to learn what the true nature of reality is. And I've been at it for 50 years now. But something happened to me. I grew up in a very kind of secular home. We went to church every now and then, like for Christmas or Easter or something like that. But it was not a religious family, and I never really took religion or anything like that seriously. I guess I would describe myself as an agnostic back when I was that age. And when I was about 25 years old, I was working in Baltimore, Maryland at an advertising agency, and I had a couple of roommates. We were all three of us bachelors. We lived in a really great old townhouse in Bolton Hill neighborhood of Baltimore, which is these three-story row houses, and this one had been made into an apartment building. And we lived in one that was on two floors. And I was up on a Saturday night on the second floor of that apartment in my bedroom, and I was really, really sick with the flu. I had a terrible case of the flu and felt awful. I was trying to read a book. Ironically, the book was Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, because that was the beginning of my metamorphosis. But I was really ill, but I heard people coming in to the apartment downstairs, and which wasn't unusual. It was a Saturday night. And I had, as I said, two roommates, and they were bringing some people in, and I heard this party started going on down there. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll feel better if I get up and go down and see what's going on. So I did, and I got dressed, went down there, and had a few drinks and whatever else was going on. And after a few minutes, I just felt horrible. I was just, could hardly stand up. But I managed to get myself back up the stairs and flop down in the bed. And it was like it was spinning around, like I was on the blade of a helicopter going around and around. And suddenly, and I felt my chest expand and contract and expand. And suddenly, it's just sort of like I popped. And everything was kind of calm, and I felt okay. And I kind of looked around, and I looked up, and I could see the ceiling, and I saw all the little cracks in the ceiling, and places where we needed paint. And then I kind of looked around, and I saw my body down on the bed, and it was like sprawled out like roadkill. And I thought, my goodness, that's me down there, or that's my body. And that's when I had a sort of revelation, which was that I'm not my body. Up until then, I thought I was my body, and I'm up here. I'm my consciousness, and my body's down there. And then I did not have the full blown experience that a lot of NDE people have, where you go through the tunnel and you go to the light, and you have the past life review. I had something similar like that, which I'll be happy to describe about 10 years later, but it was more of a mystical experience, more of an experience of mystery, where I felt that I merged with the cosmic mind, and it was love and comfort, and all was one. And whatever I thought about, I knew about. I knew, even though I didn't. In my normal state, I could ask questions or think about something, and all the information would come. So I did have that kind of an experience later. But that first one, I kind of, I guess, the next thing I knew was the next morning, I somehow went back into my body, and woke up the next morning feeling a little better than I did the night before. Finally got over that flu. But that started me on my way, Peggy, to try to find out what the true nature of reality was. And I joined the Rosicrucian Order, which, of course, is a society of individuals who study metaphysical laws. I took all their courses that they were offering at that time, and we really learned a lot. I read everything I could about it. When Raymond Moody's book came out around 1975 or so, I read that through in one sitting. I later on had a radio, well, it was an internet talk show. We call them podcasts now, but I did that for 3 years. I interviewed lots of near-death survivors. I interviewed quantum physicists, people who were studying paranormal activities, scientists. Interviewed a lady who had a PhD in pharmacology, who was studying mediums and whether they could actually communicate with the dead, which apparently they can, if bring back information that they could get no other way. So yeah, that was my experience. That was a long, long time ago, and but I've learned a lot since. So there you go.
50 years, that's a long time. Where do you think this study is headed? Because I just feel we're not there. We're not even, close to being there.
Well, that's a good question. The problem is, to me, it's very simple. Back in it really started in the 18th. No, I would say it started in the 17th century with Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes was an English philosopher who was kind of railing against the witch trials that were going on in Massachusetts and in England and on the continent of Europe. And he was a writer and well known at the time. And he said that if God created it, that's all there is. And so, I mean, the basic, I can't quote exactly his words, but basically what he said was, God created this physical reality that we're in, and that's all there is. There's no heaven, there's no hell, there's no angels, there's no demons, there's no Satan, there's nothing but this reality, and all that stuff about witches and make pacts with the devil and so forth is a lot of BS. And intellectuals bought onto that, and that's what led to what's called the Age of Enlightenment. And the Age of Enlightenment, people like Thomas Jefferson in our country were what's called deists. They bought into Thomas Hobbes' idea that God created it. It's like a great big clockwork. In fact, it's called the clockmaker theory. God created it, let it go, and is no longer involved in our lives. And so intellectuals thought that up until, and well, I guess they still do, but up until the mid 19th century, 1859, along came Charles Darwin with this theory, the origin of species caused by survival of the fittest, and that allowed intellectuals to get rid of God altogether and say that all that exists is the material world. And so that's what science that's taught in schools and universities, except for quantum physics, is still teaching. So people who are well educated and have taken a lot of science, if they believe what they've been taught, think that all that exists is the material world, which is not so. It's absolutely crazy. It ignores quantum physics and what's been found out there. It ignores the Big Bang theory, because if all that exists is material substance, it had to come from something. And so they say, well, it came from nothing in an instant. Well, that's ridiculous. Nothing comes from nothing. That's impossible. Any idiot knows that, but they still, will say that, or that, no, it's the universe expands and contracts. Anyway, it's still being taught in school. And so anybody who buys into what they learned in science class thinks there's no life after death, that there's no God, that we're like robots made of meat and bone and skin, and we've got a brain that's like a computer that somehow magically produces our consciousness, which is not so. The fact of the matter is, I'll tell you where there's a university that's studying this and has come to the conclusion that the brain does not create consciousness, that the brain is like a receiver of consciousness that integrates our individual consciousness with our bodies. And that's the University of Virginia, Charlottesville. It's only 60 miles up the road from me. And they have a division called the Division of Perceptual Studies that was formed in 1967. But actually, the guy who was the first head of that started this research in 1962. He's been studying children's memories of past lives since then. He wrote his first book in 1966 called 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. In the last 60 years, they've studied more than 2,500 cases of children remembering past lives, and they have what they call solved 1,700 of them, where they've found an individual who fit the description that the child was saying he or she was in the previous life, based on their name, dates, occupation, family members, location, and so forth. So it's pretty hard to argue that reincarnation doesn't happen when they've got 1,700 proved cases.
I've heard Dr. Bruce Grayson say on interviews that there really isn't good evidence of reincarnation.
Well, I've heard Dr. Grayson also, and he's the guy who says that the brain does not create consciousness, that it's a receiver. Why does he?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I've interviewed Jim B. Tucker, who is the current head of DOPS, and he certainly thinks that reincarnation is real.
I've heard several people say that Bruce Grayson is atheist.
Well, he grew up as an atheist, and I don't know. I'm surprised to hear that, because I've watched a number of videos of Dr. Grayson, Bruce Grayson, and I have not seen any of that come out. Saw one just recently that was done by what's his name, Alex Ferrari. It was a great interview.
Yes, I watched those. I watched one anyway. I think, was he on a couple times?
The one that I watched was fairly recently, the last few weeks.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it must have been on before, because I've watched several interviews that he's been on. I believe that was one of the shows he was on. I listen very, very closely to what he says and any of the researchers, what they say. And at the end of the day, I feel it's just not good enough. What evidence, what studies, what research, it is just not good enough. I just feel we are so far from there yet, because I feel, until, this is my own personal thing, that until we all, myself included, get our biases out of it, can we really see the truth of the matter?
Well, we all have biases, and I certainly did. And the thing that, as I said earlier, I studied metaphysics for 10 years, from the time I had the out-of-body experience until I had that mystical experience. And it really was the mystical experience that convinced me that we are spiritual beings, and that and that there's a whole lot more to the universe and to reality than we perceive with our five senses. And so it really was the experience, rather than the evidence of reading what had happened to other people and what was being studied, that convinced me. It was that experience that convinced me. But if you really look at quantum physics and what they've learned in experiments, you can see that the mind, for example, in the double slit experiment, what the researcher knows changes the outcome of the experiment, and it's predictable how it changes it. So the mind therefore cannot be confined within the skull for that to happen. I mean, that's illogical. If it affects what the researcher is doing and the outcome of the experience, just his thoughts affect it, then obviously his thoughts are not just inside his head.
See, I compare that to the studies they've done on monks praying and changing, cancer cells somewhere else, or the studies on prayer they've done for patients that don't know who's been being prayed for and who's not, and the ones prayed for, heal, recover, whatever, quicker. And so it's, to me, it's like the same thing. There's an
Yeah,
intention that we have a mental force. People
exactly.
call it manifestation,
There was a study done in the early 2000s at my Columbia University Medical School that had groups praying for women in Korea, South Korea, who were undergoing in vitro processes to get pregnant. And those that were prayed for had twice the percentage of success. It went from 26% to 50%. 26% for those not prayed for, 50% for those who were prayed for. Now that's pretty
Yeah.
startling difference.
Yeah, that makes me think of, the spark of light they can see now. They're doing IVF. What the
Mm-hmm.
spark of light that occurs, and they can judge which um, embryos are going to do better by the intensity of that light.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think of, that little, Christian kid song, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, and it just seems that there's a lot to this light, so many into ears, we're in the light. We saw the light.
Exactly. No question about it. And that's part of what my experience was in that mystical experience is the light and light, love, the feeling of completeness, and it's just very hard to describe. But
And,
it was
people that are told it's not your time or is your time or you got to go back. And it's just all points to there's an intelligence that is so involved in our lives and knows us so well, our past and our memories and our future and the whole collective future, what needs to be done for who goes back, who don't. I mean, there's some kind of plan. I mean, and we look at, I don't know that much about science, but I've seen enough to know how intricately everything, how it works together. Like, how is that just chance?
absolutely. One of the people I've studied is Edgar Cayce, and I actually interviewed his son, who was still alive at the time in 2007. He was 95 years old, Edgar Evans Cayce. And I've interviewed the head of the Association for Research and Enlightenment and other people who really know the Cayce readings. And for your listeners and viewers who don't know who Edgar Cayce was, he was known as the sleeping prophet back when he was alive. He lived from 1877 to 1945. And for over 20 years, he would put himself into a self-induced hypnotic trance once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and answer questions that were sent to him by people who were looking for cures or answers to questions. Mainly it was for health issues. It's also known as the founder of holistic medicine. But he said that he answered a lot of questions. He was a very strong Christian who, when information about reincarnation started coming out of his readings, because a lot of people had issues that they were dealing with that actually came or started in a previous life and had been carried over, and they still hadn't been resolved. And that was coming through. He stopped giving those readings for a while because, as a Christian, that's not part of the dogma of the church, of the canon of the church. It was taken out of the canon in 553 at the Second Council of Constantine by the Emperor Justinian. I can't think of his name right now. But anyway, the emperor wanted it out of there. And so anyway, and then he read the Bible through and saw that there are a lot of references in there that can be construed as saying that reincarnation is real. For example, that uh, he Jesus was asked by his disciples who people thought he was, and he said, Jesus asked his disciples, and his disciples said, "Well, some think you're John the Baptist, other thinks you're Elijah." Well, Elijah lived 400 years before Jesus, so if Jesus was Elijah, he had to be the reincarnation of Elijah, and things like that. That's all the way through. So, but what Edgar Cayce said about God, he was asked while in a trance, is God a creative force, or is God a personal God? And Cayce's answer was both. And the way I interpret that is that that behind everything is a mind that has created it all, and we're sort of like um, characters in the dream that this mind is having. But we all have guides, what some people would call guardian angels, who are with us all the time, who are protecting us, trying to give us ideas about what to do, things that come through as intuition. And that really is what is helping and guiding us. And we're all part of this big dream. So we're all connected. We're all one. We're going to meet people and come in contact people that we need to meet and come in contact with in order for us to fulfill whatever our life plan is that we probably decided on, at least to some extent, before we incarnated. So that's kind of the way I look at it. How about you?
I have said before that I've come to think as I've gotten older, it seems like life is like when you're born, there's this great big puzzle, and God takes it and throws it on the floor and says, now go pick up the pieces. Because as you get older, it seems like the pieces all start to make a picture, and you start realizing how this happened and that happened and how did this happen. It's like it's so like it's woven, like it's intentional. And you start to see a masterpiece as the older you get. And you look
Well,
back at your life.
that brings to mind a quote by author Schopenhauer, who was a German philosopher in the 19th century. And he said that, to paraphrase what he said, like when you're in it, it's all chaos and seems crazy. And when you get to an old age and look back, it's like the plot of a novel unfolding, your life, the way things worked out. It looks like it was all planned. And I guess in a way it was. I think we definitely have free will, but things are going to happen to us that'll, if we have a particular plan that were kind of plotted out from the beginning. And I hope that I just had, yeah. So anyway, that's an interesting way to look at it. Throwing those the puzzle pieces down on the floor and pick them up.
I love to sit with elderly people with a notebook and say, tell me your life story. Start from the beginning and tell me your memories. And I did it with my mother-in-law when she was on her deathbed. And recently I did with my friend's mother. But the thing with her was, I was like, wow, what a story. And I found out later, most of it wasn't true. She's got dementia. She said her dad died when she was a little girl. There was like, I don't know, like 9 kids. And he died when she was little on a horse and buggy accident. And I said, so your mom had to raise all those kids on the farm by herself? Yeah, da da da. And then I told my friend later, and she said, he died at his old age. The horse and buggy accident.
Maybe that was a different life.
I don't know. She's so sincere.
Yeah, cool.
But yeah, so I thought, well, there kind of goes my thing. I was wanting to sit with elderly and write their little memoirs for them because their family's gonna be yelling at me. That never happened.
That's funny. All righty. Well, How we doing here?
So did you go from agnostic to anything else through your 50 years of looking into things?
Yeah, my first wife. I've been married twice. My first wife was a Catholic, and I would go to church with her, but I never really got into it. Then she left. She was from France. She decided to go home to France, uh, and later on, I remarried a very strong Christian. And I've been going to church with her regularly every Sunday we can go, probably for, we've been married now for 37 years. And for the first probably 20 of those years, I went to church, but never really, you know, got interested in joining it. I would go to Bible studies and Sunday school and all of that, and I found it very interesting. But after a while, uh, the more I learned about what Jesus said and did, the more I could see that he actually had what I think is the same view of reality that I have, which is that we're all, each of us, a sort of spark of the divine that's come into this reality to experience this reality, to learn to love others, and to what he called the kingdom of heaven is simply the idea of everyone loving each other and working to help others. Our work should be to in service to others. And so I did become a Christian and got baptized about 15 years ago, and I go to church regularly. I don't buy into all of the doctrine because I think that the people in the early church based what they heard from Jesus on what their culture was at that time, which one of the things they did, for example, was sacrifice animals to God to overcome their sins. So it seemed natural to them to say, well, Jesus was a sacrifice to God to overcome their sins. But to me, that doesn't make sense. I mean, why would God send his son to be sacrificed?
I don't
uh,
think everyone believes everything. I don't think everybody
uh,
believes all of the doctrine. You could talk to probably every church and they would probably all debate every single issue. We all
exactly. So
still,
anyway, the conclusion I came to is I'll take what resonates with me and what
right.
doesn't, and I'll just ignore it.
Yeah, and
And
that's what I tell people about my channel. I don't like this, I don't like that. Well, take what you do like and the heck with the rest. Kind of like a salad bar, pick what you like, leave what you don't like there. Don't sit there and complain you don't like that. Just get what you like and go. You know,
exactly.
when I was 5 years old, I had my first NDE drowning and I hovered over the pond. I was shown my family didn't love me. And then a voice clearly said, God sends children here to be loved. That's why he sends them here. Of course, then I was like, well, you just told me my family don't love me. Then you tell me that. It's not right. But so, I really didn't get, even though I had that memory for so long, I'm like, wait a minute. Is that true? What I was told? Why wouldn't it be true? That's why God sends us here to be loved. So
Well, I think we're here to be loved. We're here to learn to love. We're here to experience difficulties and overcome them because that's what builds character and it builds wisdom. Because to me, life is a lot like that movie Groundhog Day, where the guy starts out as a real jerk and he does self-centered things, and he doesn't get to go on till February to the next day, to February 3rd, until he makes the right decisions, he does the loving things, and that's how he advances. And to me, that's kind of what life is about. We're here to face difficulties and overcome them. We're going to face the same kind of difficulties over and over until we handle them correctly, just like Bill Murray's character in that movie. So there you go.
yeah.
And the key is love and compassion. That's what we're here to learn.
That movie, Beautiful Mind, at the end where he says, how love saved him. And the greatest of all equations or something is love.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is a person that was strictly mathematical, minded. And you know, at the end of his life, it's all about love. You know, the love that his wife gave him that sustained him through his illness, his mental illness. And yeah, so.
Right. There you go. I agree.
Well, I appreciate you coming on today. You have a wonderful Easter, and I'll get this sent out to you later.
Very good. I enjoyed it, Peggy. Thanks for having me on.
Bye-bye.